Students, welcome to the program. The topic for today's program is Secondary Education Commission 1952-53. Objectives set for today's program are to get acquainted with the cause of appointing the Secondary Education Commission. Second, to know about the aims of Secondary Education Commission. Third, to become familiar with the major recommendations of Secondary Education Commission. A number of commissions have been appointed in the past to survey Indian education: the Indian Education Commission of 1882, the University Commission of 1902, the Sadler Commission of 1917, and the University Education Commission 1948-49, all of which dealt incidentally with certain aspects of secondary education. But no commission had so far been appointed to survey the problems of secondary education. There were other considerations also which made a survey of Indian education in the country necessary. One of the major defects of the prevailing system of secondary education was its unilinear and predominantly academic character. The need for reorganization of the secondary education with diversified courses had become more urgent as a result of the acceptance by the Government of India and the state governments basic education as a pattern of education at the elementary stage. A need was felt to appoint a commission exclusively, extensively and intensively with secondary education. The Central Advisory Board of Education in its meeting held in 1949 and 1951 recommended the appointment of a commission for secondary education. Secondary Education Commission or Mudaliar Commission 1952 and 1953. On 23rd September 1952, the Union Government appointed the Secondary Education Commission under the chairmanship of Dr. A. Lakshmana Swami Mudaliar, Vice Chancellor, Madras University, along with 8 members. Now the terms of reference of the Commission. Under the terms of reference, the Commission was asked first to inquire into and report on the present position of secondary education in India in all its aspects. Second, to suggest measures for its reorganization and improvement with particular reference to first, the aims, organization and contents of secondary education. Second, its relationship to primary, basic and higher education. Third, the interrelation of secondary schools of different types. Fourth, other allied problems. So that a sound and a reasonable uniform system of secondary education suited to our needs and resources may be provided for a whole country. The Commission presented its report on June 1953 and presented its recommendations on almost all the aspects of secondary education. Now, the aims of secondary education as envisaged by Secondary Education Commission. As political, social and economic conditions change and new problems arise, it becomes necessary to re-examine carefully and restate clearly the objectives which education at each definite stage should keep in view. Accordingly, Commission has defined the aims of secondary education in the following manner. Commission envisaged that India has recently achieved its political freedom and has, after careful consideration, decided to transform itself into a secular democratic republic. This means that the educational system must make its contribution to the development of habits, attitudes and qualities of character which will enable its citizen to bear worthily the responsibilities of democratic citizenship and to counteract all those vociferous tendencies which hinder the emergence of a broad, national and secular outlook. Secondly, though rich in potential resources, India is actually a poor country. At present, a large majority of its people had to live at an economically subhuman level. One of its most urgent problems, if not the most urgent, is to improve productive efficiency, to increase the national health and thereby to raise appreciably the standard of living of the people. Thirdly, Partly as a result of this oppressive and widespread poverty, there is a serious lack of educational facilities, and bulk of the people are so obsessed with the problem of making some sort of living that they have not been able to give sufficient attention to cultural pursuits and activities. Hence, there is a need for reorienting the educational system in such a way that it will stimulate a cultural renaissance. It's clear that we shall have to formulate our aims with reference to these broad categories: the training of character to fit the students to participate creatively as citizens in the emerging democratic social order, the improvement of their practical and vocational efficiency so that they may play their part in building up the economic prosperity of the country, and the development of their literary, artistic and cultural interests, which are necessary for self-expression and for the full development of the human personality, without which a living national culture cannot come into being. Role of education in developing democratic citizenship. Citizenship in a democracy is a very exacting and challenging responsibility for which every citizen has to be carefully trained. It involves many intellectual, social and moral qualities which cannot be expected to grow of their own. The secondary education, which would be the end of all the formal education for the majority of the citizens, must assume the responsibility of providing the necessary training for this purpose. The first requisite in this connection is to develop the capacity for clear thinking and receptivity to new ideas. Closely allied to clarity of thoughts is clearness in speech and in writing. To be able to make one's influence felt and to assist in the formulation of healthy public opinion, an educated person should be able to express himself clearly both in speech and writing. No education is worth the name which does not inculcate the qualities necessary for living graciously, harmoniously and efficiently with one's fellow men. Among the qualities which should be cultivated for this purpose are discipline, cooperation, social sensitiveness and tolerance. Each one of them had its own special part to play in the humanizing and socializing of the personality. Now, second aim is improvement of vocational efficiency. According to the Commission, the issue of concern for the secondary education is to increase the productivity of technical and vocational efficiency of our students. Students must acquire a yearning for perfection and learn to make pride in doing everything as thoroughly as they can. Likewise, teachers should learn to reject firmly but with sympathy all work that is half-hearted or slipshod or casual. Side by side with the development of this attitude, there is a need to promote technical skills and efficiency at all stages of education so as to promote trained and efficient personnel to work out schemes of industrial and technological advancement. Third aim is development of personality. The third main function of secondary education is to release the source of creative energy in the students so that they may be able to appreciate their cultural heritage, to cultivate rich interests which they can pursue in their leisure and so contribute in later life to the development of this heritage. In the past, our schools have left whole areas of their pupil personality untouched and unquestioned, their emotional life, their social impulses, their constructive talents and their artistic tastes. Fourth aim is education for leadership. A democracy cannot function successfully unless all the people, not merely a particular section, are trained for discharging their responsibilities, and this involves training in discipline as well as leadership. The primary or basic school which inculcate in all capacity for disciplined work, while the university will train leadership at the highest level in different walks of life. The special function of the secondary school in this context is to train persons which will be able to assume the responsibility of leadership in the social, political, industrial or cultural fields in their own small groups or community or locality. Now the major recommendations given by the Madhuliyar Commission. First recommendation is duration of secondary education. Traditional structure of education had been 4 to 5 years of primary education, followed by middle school education, followed by 2 years high school education leading to matriculation examination. The Secondary Education Commission modified the 2 years high school education and substituted it with 4 years higher secondary education, and later CAB, Central Advisory Board of Education, approved 3 years higher secondary education instead of 4 years, thus making it 11 years school education in total. Under the new organizational pattern, the Commission recommended that the secondary education should be for children between 11 to 17 years of age. It has divided the 7 years education into 2 parts. First part, the middle or junior secondary or senior basic stage, which should cover a period of 3 years. And second, a higher secondary stage, which should cover a period of 4 years. Now the second recommendation, the Commission recommended that it will not be possible to convert all the existing high schools into higher secondary schools in the near future. In the case of such schools, the problem would be to improve their efficiency within their present structure, and the recommendations that has been made elsewhere to reconstruct the curriculum and the methods of education will apply to them also. And thus, during the transitional stage, the existing high school and higher secondary schools should function on the lines laid down. Now the third recommendation, the present intermediate stage should be replaced by a higher secondary stage, which should be of 3-year duration, 1 year of the present intermediate being included in it. The senior intermediate class, 12th class, should be combined with the degree class, and the junior intermediate class, that is 11th class, with the high school. Now the fourth recommendation, as a consequence of preceding recommendation, the Commission recommended that the introduction of degree course in university to be of 3 years duration. Fifth recommendation, for those who pass out the high school, there should be a provision of pre-university course of 1 year. Then the sixth recommendation, technical and vocational education. The Commission recommended that majority of students will take up some vocational pursuits and in due course achieve a reasonable degree of competence in it, either through practice and experience or through apprenticeship training. But there would be many who would like and would be in a position to pursue higher studies. For such students, polytechnics or technological institutions should be available, where technical courses covering 2 or more years should be provided. Then seventh recommendation, need for diversification of courses. The Commission recommended that secondary schools should no longer be single-track institutions, but should offer a diversity of educational programs calculated to meet varied aptitudes, interests and talents which come into prominence towards the end of the period of compulsory education. They should provide more comprehensive course which would include both general and vocational subjects, and pupils should have an opportunity to choose from them according to their needs. It is necessary to point out clearly that this diversification of course and the introduction of many practical subjects at the secondary stage does not mean that something called general or cultural education is to be provided for one group of students, while others are to be given a narrow practical or vocational or technical education. The whole modern approach to the question is based on the insight that the intellectual and cultural development of the different individuals take place best through a variety of media, that the book or the study of traditional academic subject is not the only door to the education of the personality, and that in the case of many, perhaps the majority of children, practical work organized can unlock their latent energies much more successfully than the traditional subjects which address themselves only to the mind, or worse still, the memory. Now the eighth recommendation, multilateral and multipurpose schools. As per the Secondary Education Commission, these schools should be established to provide varied types of courses for students with diverse aims, interests and abilities. Its endeavor to provide for each individual pupil suitable opportunity to use and develop his natural aptitude and inclination in the special course of studies chosen by him. The main advantages claimed for it are: first, it removes all invidious distinctions between students preparing for different courses of studies, breaking down the sense of inferiority that is associated with vocational subjects, and make it possible to plan the education system on a truly democratic basis. It provides a greater variety of educational media and thereby facilitates proper educational guidance in the choice of studies. Third, it helps to solve the problems of the wrongly classified pupil because transfer within the same school is easier to arrange than transfer from one school to another. Now the next recommendation, agriculture education in secondary schools. The Commission made special reference to teaching of agriculture at secondary school stage. Agriculture is the most important industry of the country, providing employment for over 75% of the population and forming the main occupation in the rural areas. The need, therefore, to educate the youth of the country to a proper appreciation of the role that agriculture plays in the national economy must be stressed in all schools. In view of its basic importance, the Commission recommended that all states should provide much greater opportunities for agricultural education in rural schools so that more students may take to it and adopt it as a vocation. With agriculture, two other allied subjects should be closely integrated: horticulture and animal husbandry. Now the next recommendation, management of schools. The managing board of all the schools should be registered and should consist of a limited number of persons with the headmaster as an ex officio member. No member of the managing board should directly or indirectly interfere with the internal administration of the schools. Next recommendation, school building and equipment. The open space available in the cities must be conserved to be utilized as a playground by the group of schools. And normally in designing for schools, care should be taken to see that an area of not less than 10 square feet is provided per student in the classroom. The optimum number of boys to be admitted to any class should be 30 and the maximum should not in any case exceed 40. The optimum number in the whole school should be 500 while the maximum should not exceed 750. Next recommendation is hours of working and vacations. As a rule, the total number of working days in a school should not be less than 200. The working hours per week should be at least 35 periods of about 45 minutes each. The school should work regularly for 6 days in the week, one of the days being a half day when the teachers and the students might meet informally and work together on various extracurricular and social projects. And then normally during the year, there should be a summer vacation of 2 months and 2 breaks of 10 to 15 days at suitable periods during the year. Now the next recommendation, that is finance. A cess called the Industrial Educational Cess believed the amount collected to be utilized for the furtherance of technical and vocational education at the secondary stage. The center should assume a certain amount of direct responsibility for the contemplated reorganization of secondary education and give finance aid for the purpose. So it can be concluded that the Secondary Education Commission gave comprehensive recommendations pertaining to secondary education. However, it was found that the similar recommendations have not received due consideration in the past, but whatever the reasons for failure to implement such recommendations in the past, the country could have not afforded after the attainment of independence to neglect or ignore the great and pressing problems of educational reconstruction or failure to take immediate steps to tackle them in a manner conducive to the promotion of the welfare of its citizens and safeguarding its future as a force and progressive democratic republic in the Committee of Nations. With this, I conclude today's lecture on Secondary Education Commission 1952-53. Hope you have enjoyed the session. For now, it's time to say goodbye. Stay blessed.